My hairy arm. My mom's always like, you need to wax your arm.
She has elephant hair and just has like tufts of random hair.
The first question that I think a lot of people have, it wasn't a question that I had, but I know that it's something that my mom had, is, is this just a phase? The answer to that is no. When you have somebody who is going through a whirlwind of emotions and trying to make a really important change in their lives and wondering if the people around them are going to be okay with that, I think it's really important to accept them at face value.
Yes. Yeah, I think that is a really good idea, to accept somebody at face value, especially when dealing with people who are different. But then even when you get like super into that idea, accepting a transgender person is accepting them beyond face value. You know what I mean? Because before you transition, you're saying to people like, this is who I am, and you want people to see that. And for somebody to understand you and accept you, they have to see past face value to see who you truly are.
They have to have vision.
Yeah.
That's a good point. For example, when Cassius transitioned, I can't remember how long, after a while he transitioned back to being referred to as, her and she and Melanie, which was his birth name.
Okay. So I wanted to clarify this part, remember when I emailed you?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Which types of transitions you were talking about. Mm-hmm. There are, two that I know of. So there's socially transitioning, which is the first transition you were talking about, transitioning to male. Cut my hair and I started dressing more masculinely. Mm-hmm. And I asked people to call me by a more masculine name and by male pronouns. That's socially transitioning. Physically transitioning is when I started to take hormones. And I feel like that's a huge difference. Like, those are really two very distinct parts of my life. Taking hormones, it's like going through puberty for a boy. My voice got deeper and I started to grow facial hair. My jawline, my bone density increased, and so that's what makes like a thicker jawline. Even the brow ridge gets a little bit more thick. The hair on my body expanded, like there's like more hair here, like on the inside of my arms. Just hairier, just thicker and hairier in general. Yeah, I've got a little stash. It's weak, but it's there. So the interesting part, which I feel like some people don't understand, is that genetics also plays a huge part in it. So I have friends whose cisgendered male family members have like full beards and they're very thick and stuff, and they grew to grow beards within the first year of being on testosterone.
Oh, okay.
Same with like hairy backs and happy trails and stuff like that. Like the patterns of hair that you have, that's all genetic and how fast it grows. And so our dad didn't have facial hair really, and so I don't really have facial hair. And so I know that some people think it's because like, oh, well, you're transgender, like of course you can't grow facial hair. But really, like, men and women have the same capability. It's just that it depends on how much testosterone or estrogen you have in your body.
We're very heavily focusing on the female to male transition.
Yeah.
Because this is like my experience and your experience. If you know anything about it, can you explain, for example, what taking hormones would change for someone transitioning from male to female would be?
I have watched documentaries and talked to a therapist about things like that and read a bunch about hormone replacement therapy. And with hormones, you can give, but you cannot take away. If we're talking about like positives in giving and negatives in taking away, testosterone is a positive, so that's what you're giving. And estrogen is what you do to like take away. That's one way of describing it. And maybe I hope that makes sense to other people as well. Does it make sense to you?
Yeah.
Okay. When male to female transsexuals transition, their voice doesn't get higher or anything. That's all practice, I believe. And the bone density that they've grown doesn't go away, like their brow line and their jaw lines. That's what I know. Yeah, the hair patterns, like, I'm sure that it gets less thick, but like, if you grew hair here, it's not just gonna like disappear.
I mean, women born biologically female also, I mean, like, I have hairy hands and knuckles and toes. So
I had hair on my toes and on my fingers before I transitioned.
Okay. And then after that, he decided that wasn't for him, and he went back to being male. And at no point during that situation did I think to question,
I wanted to like clarify why I did that. I feel like if somebody else is experiencing this in their life with somebody who's transgender, they would want to know why, and maybe that person isn't capable of explaining that, because I certainly wasn't when I was doing it. I remember feeling very uncomfortable physically when I had socially transitioned and was wearing masculine clothing. My body didn't fit the type of clothing I wanted to wear. I felt really awkward emotionally and uncomfortable physically because my pants were like digging into my hips. I don't think that I had gotten like a proper binder yet, and so that didn't look right to me either. The ratio of my shoulders to my hips didn't sit right with me. Like, it just made me uncomfortable, which is also known as dysphoria. I just felt really unhappy. Like, it's a really sad thing to realize about yourself. Like, that coupled with not seeing what I wanted to see in the mirror really got to me. And so I just got tired of it, and I just wanted to try one more time to be cisgendered. I did switch back, is what you're saying. I transitioned back socially to Melanie and asked people to call me Melanie, and I started wearing feminine clothing, and I got like a more feminine haircut. It was still short, but I just got it more feminine. And then I spent the summer in Florida. Got back to Colorado, I was just like, I really just can't do this. It's just not for me. And I went back to being Cassius.
Like, I didn't feel like I was questioning, like, is this just a phase? Like, I kind of understood it was just something that he needed to figure out on his own. I did feel, honestly, relieved when he went back to being called Melanie and dressing more feminine, just because it would just, like, I didn't have to deal with, like, my own confusion about everything and trying to figure out how to approach my sister as a brother now. Like, I felt like there would be a difference. But then when he went back to being referred to as Cassius and presenting as male, I honestly just felt really sad, because I felt like that was proof that he, like, the entire time when I was happier that he was presenting as female, like, he wasn't happy. Is this a phase? I felt like that wasn't my place, and my job as his older sister, my eyes, his protector, I felt like it was only in my place to love him and to support him. So, short answer is no. That's definitely something my mother has come to terms with now. I think eventually you guys will too, if you're having these same kinds of thoughts, questioning, is this just going to be over at some point? I think what that comes from, that whole is this a phase thing, is not wanting to lose that person you've known for so long, or in my case, like my whole life. I think it's important to realize that you're never losing that person. What's being lost in this situation is that person's own misgivings and uncomfortable feelings about who they are. What's happening is they're losing a world of discomfort. That's all. That's the only thing being lost in the situation.
Mm-hmm. That's really true, that we are losing discomfort when our family members and our acquaintances accept us for who we are. Because gender is socially constructed, all we want is to be accepted by society. While we're struggling to accept ourselves, that's true, we also want to be accepted by the people around us. And that is like major, like for me, like I would say like 90% of it is just, I want people to see me for who I am. I want to feel comfortable with that. And I want people to feel comfortable with me. So yeah, that's a really good point.
Talking about it in terms of losses and gains, you're really gaining a lot in this situation if you are if someone in your life is transitioning. What you're gaining is that fully realized person, and not just part of who they are, because those people are always hiding parts of themselves. And so once they come out and are looking to transition, what's happening is that you're really gaining and getting to know that person exactly as who they are.